right, Matt. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, how you got to where you are today and what you do?
Yeah, so I went to Grand Valley State University for hospitality and tourism management with a business minor. Worked for Marriott for the vast majority of my career so far, working my way up to be a general manager. And now I'm currently working for the Easton Porter Group as their director of HR. Moved down here, wanted to work for this beautiful company with we have tons of great properties.
Yeah,
So really, that's what brought me down to Virginia. Originally a Michigan kid. Um, had a great time working for Marriott and kind of cutting my teeth dealing with any problem you could ever have right there on the floor.
that's awesome. And I have to say the Eastern Porter Group, I mean, just the photos, the website is just so beautiful. It's like one of these idyllic wedding kind of websites. It looks just like gorgeous. So whoever put that together, you should absolutely compliment them.
Yeah, we not only do we have great looking properties, but the people who actually make the events go, some outstanding humans. So our website looks great, but then every service on property is just outstanding.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, like the vineyard looks so sick. I'm like, ooh, beautiful. Maybe I need to make more excuses to go to Virginia, you know?
It's tough to work when there's beautiful mountains and a gorgeous vineyard right outside the window. Luckily, my computer screen is very large, so I can hide behind that for a good amount of time.
Blocks that window.
Yeah, pretty much.
And yeah, I suppose like diving into like our first question. And interesting because your background, you're now like, director of HR, and I'm curious your take on this, which is like, what do you think are, your three biggest roadblocks or challenges? Yeah, what do you think those three
Three
are?
biggest roadblocks. Yeah. Especially what I'm finding in the hospitality industry is finding and keeping I call them actual like people who want to be in hospitality, those who understand that you're going to have a grumpy guest or some type of negative interaction and who can easily turn around to that next guest and just be back in their game because they truly love providing that service, helping a guest, whether that be a front desk agent at our hotel to a housekeeper who is going to walk outside and there's a guest right there who wants to ask them the question. um, Other roadblocks, two other roadblocks, I would say really still on the recruiting side, even just finding people, period. Like you pointed
Yeah,
out, we have beautiful properties. um, Everything that used to be, people want to work there, people want to work in a beautiful space, provide these things. The job pool of employees is just so small currently, that
yeah,
you have to get really creative in your recruiting, and then making sure that people stay on board and continue to be bought into what you're doing. And then third is just the classic hospitality coming out of COVID.
yeah.
You know, how do we fill these restaurants? It's one thing to get in a great server, but if you're down, um, how do in as you pointed out with our website, our marketing team does a great job. So we've been able to fight off a lot of this, but in past experience, it's one thing to get in that great server, but if they have a down week, 2 down weeks, they're living,
Yeah.
this is my month. It's not what comes in 3 months. No, it comes in 6 months. What is my paycheck today going to look like? Or do I need to go to another industry completely, that has an hourly rate where I know
Yeah.
every week this is what I'm going to get? So a lot of it is truly getting in the good people, and then all of the different aspects that push them out of the industry,
Yeah.
making sure they want to stay in it.
It's interesting because we hear it. I mean, I run this podcast up to 25, 30 episodes, I'd say at this stage. And, the conversation before started, we need bodies at all cost. 18 months ago, that was the cause du jour, as they say. And then it's now it went into, we need quality. Like we need quality and we need quality now. Like we can't just have bodies. And now, we went to RFDC, Restaurant Finance and Technology Conference in Las Vegas this week. And the big thing that everybody was talking about was very much on the retention side of things. Very much like, yeah, we got them. How do we keep them? Like almost like
Yep.
anxious for that. And like, I guess like my question to you is interesting. You mentioned like the quality employee first. Like, how are you going about kind of like measuring for quality employees and trying to even like scale that acquisition of quality employees? Is there a
Yeah.
program process?
So my current, what I do, so all of our direct line managers do initial interview, very much empower them to create their own team. But where I keep an eye out for any like issues. If a manager has hired 3 employees, 2 of them leave within 2 weeks, and we start to see a pattern that way, that's where I
Yeah.
speak with the manager themselves. Okay, how did your interview go? Like, we've already discussed what questions you're asking, but like, what did they say to you that you thought they were going to be a great fit for us, that they could do this job? And now we're finding 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, you've done the training, you've done the on-site hands-on, and they're not a fit. How can we make sure that you're able to really discern who is interviewing perfectly well, but doesn't have that drive, doesn't have the skill set? How can we
Yeah.
make sure that you're tasked to be able to pick through, and you're not hiring the people who can put on the good face, and for 3 weeks, we're hoping, and then you get to it and you're like, that's not who I interviewed. So that's very much where I look at, try
Yeah.
to stay out of the actual line level interviews.
Yeah.
Let our managers hire their team, let them have that full ownership, but then always following up with them if we're seeing that retention issue. Every time
Yeah.
I see a termination come through, a manager gets a quick email from me, hey, when do we want to discuss? Because whether we're
Yeah.
going to discuss why they were terminated or why you shouldn't have hired them, we have something
Yeah.
to discuss. There's something, 1 or 2 ways, there's a way we can improve from this person leaving us.
It's great that you articulate that because it's interesting. I talk to lots and lots of different restaurants, hotels, resorts, and people come back to culture all the time. And they talk like, we have a great culture, but like, you know, I always like to use the phrase, it's hard to describe, but when you see it, when it comes to it. And I'm like, that's not really a process though. Like there has to be something, and it can't just be money that why people want to
Yep.
stay. So it sounds like you have a very formalized process here for dealing with the sort of termination. Is there like a formalized process for like how you guys try to train the employees, how you try to promote them? Is there like a way you think about it that way? That's like a formal process?
Yeah. So each of our restaurants has their own specific training program implemented. And we very much focus on, you're going to get some written documentation, some sort of sit down and learn. But from day one, you're going to be shadowing one of our top servers.
Yeah.
And then for 3 weeks, you're assisting. You might get a table or 2, but the vast majority of what you're doing is the running food, learning the food, making sure that before you're taking the order and having that elevated expectation where we want you to talk about our other properties, or we want you to know about all of our wines and can recommend and feel very
Yeah.
comfortable. You've seen somebody more than twice do it. You've seen somebody do it for an entire week. You've seen as many different variations of the unique guests that we get in, so that they're far more comfortable. And then we do testing, whether it be a written testing and then an actual practical, and that has a very high standard, and you
Yeah.
can get held back. Like, if it doesn't feel you're comfortable, yes, you did the steps, yes, you knew the things,
Yeah.
but if you can't tell it to a manager in a controlled setting, I'm not
Right.
going to
Look
send you
for
out
it.
there where
Yeah.
you're acting nervous on this. Like, we can give you a couple more days. Like, what is it that you're worried about? How can we help you? But we're not.
Oh, no. Hello?
There's no.
Oh,
I think I
did
cut
you
out on
did
you.
you cut out? Here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Sorry about
Do I
that.
turn
I
your
don't know if
camera
it's
off and
me.
on for a second just so I can make sure, so like it
Yeah,
resets itself. And you want to go back to what you were saying there, and I'll edit that piece out.
yeah,
The
definitely.
way it
So
froze as well. You're like, I don't want the public to see that.
make that the thumbnail of the video. That'll be the hot take. You could set me up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our team goes through their training, shadowing for multiple weeks, making sure they're very comfortable. They then have their written tests and their practical test. And even if the employee is able to go through the steps, they have the knowledge. There does come a part where the manager is able to hold them back or provide more training if they're nervous on it. We very much want to send our servers out there very confident in what they're doing. So if the server's a little weak in their when they do it with a manager, you're not going to be able to go out and do it for a guest then. So we want to make sure they're completely comfortable. They don't appear to be a brand new employee. They appear as if they've been there for years. So we do extend that training period, even though, some places will do a week and then you're in it. We at least do 3 weeks. That way, no matter what, our guest who expects quality from us doesn't have to accept that, oh, you're new, oh, you're learning. When you're out on the floor and you're wearing the apron and you're ready to take their order, they have no idea that you just joined our team.
It's like the standard is very high and you train them to get to that standard and you don't put them out on that floor until they're ready to go. And that's across all the different operations you have as well, like in the hotels, for example, same kind of thing.
Yep. So it's across the entire board, because especially with our Charleston properties, if you have eaten at Zero George, you probably are looking at staying at Zero George Hotel. If you've eaten at Cannon Green, you're probably coming to Zero George, and there should be no difference. The service will be different. It won't be a cookie cutter Chick-fil-A type everywhere you go, but the person assisting you is going to be just as prepared no matter which property you go to.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's interesting because obviously there is a huge challenge in preparing and training the staff, and it obviously takes an enormous amount of resource from you. And then you alluded to COVID and like how, wow, like what a sea change in terms of hospitality. And I guess my question for you, because you see hotels and you see restaurants and they're kind of, like I was saying earlier, like true for some, relevant for all, sort of like challenges and opportunities. Like what sort of trends what are like our emerging trends that you've seen in this sort of post-COVID era? Like when I see it, I see like reduced hours in restaurants. Places are not open Monday through Thursday. Less places are now trying to do more curbside or more like Uber Eats and DoorDash and that kind of thing to like offset like revenue loss in person, that kind of thing. Are you seeing kind of trends in sort of like how the type of work you're bringing in or the way the operation is running, like how has technology kind of changed things? Sorry, I'm answering the question almost for you.
No,
I'm curious, all of that. I try to get the juices flowing kind of here,
Yeah. On two end trends that I'm seeing, we're actually kind of dealing with the fact that our guests are looking for a more pre-COVID. They are like our tasting room had to change over a few different things on how wine was served or how you got our tastings, and we're starting to see those comments come back where what was acceptable for service, just coming out of COVID, or people seeing like, oh, they changed this due to COVID. A lot of our properties are seeing where people are like, okay, I don't, kind of just like with the training of the employee, I don't want to accept these things because I know COVID happened. Like we're expecting what it was pre-COVID at this point. And then it's not a huge bump, but we are seeing a lot of the employees who did leave the industry, those ones who apparently have that itch inside of them that hospitality is their thing, are coming back. So that's where we're super thankful that we can create that environment where people enjoy to work for us. And then they taste the corporate world, and they're like, wait, I'm not built for that either. And and luckily they want to come back to us. It's not like, oh, they were the problem and I don't want to be in the industry. They just thought, I don't want to be in the industry, and now they want to come back, and we're still at the top of their list for if they come back to the industry, we're who they want to go with. We have tried out at the winery an online ordering, a way you can do pickup, and it's working for our lawn service. But it's isn't creating the technology side, especially for us, I feel is creating a disconnect where we're spending
Interesting.
all this time training these employees to be almost a feature of our properties. Like, yes, it's beautiful, but every person you talk to is going to be great. If we remove you
Yeah,
talking to them, you're missing out on a key piece of coming to our properties. So we are using technology to help our staff, but it's
yeah.
finding a balance to how much of that is going to touch the guest and how much of that is just to help improve what the staff is doing behind the scenes.
It's That's actually very interesting, and I hear that a lot from, especially, you see that very intensely in quick service and FSRs, where technology post COVID has been a game changer for them, and how restaurants or and how chains, franchises implement technology, and how, the pain where you see like McDonald's with their touchscreen and there's no staff that are able to take your order, and they really struggle with that. But like, whether McDonald's actually struggles with that versus the overarching opinion is McDonald's, why don't you just have the line again? Like, the touchscreen's not helping people. Whether it
Yep.
actually is super simple or not doesn't really matter. It's like the staff aren't really trained up on how to deal with that. And or you see, like, say, who was I? What was I? Was it what restaurant? Was it Shake Shack? One of them was saying that I was chatting to, and they were saying to me that, like, fully automated kiosks. Oh no, it was I had one of the CTO. They own Friendlies. They own a bunch of different brands, but they were telling me they were launching
Yep.
like a pizza brand, and it was going to be a robot pizza in the back, and the robot was going to make all the pizza, and they were only going to have hosts, not cashiers, and that you would use all the kiosks. And their hypothesis was effectively like, people need help using these screens, but they want to be welcomed into the restaurant. But obviously, they're trying to limit the amount of employees that they have, like, at any given
Yep.
time, and make it kind of as seamless as possible. And it's interesting that, like, say, McDonald's obviously couldn't figure out how to do that clearly, or, well, like, our perception of them doing it is like everyone has a problem with it, versus like this other
Yep.
brand are like, well, we're going to go all in on this test brand for us here, this new pizza brand, where there's basically like barely any humans. And then I hear your more premium is like, no, like, the whole guest experience effectively stems from the staff we have, and it's almost that kind of level of comfort, which is very fascinating. Just like across the board, like, so, like, that's why I was like using the true for some, relevant for all, because it's like everyone's
Yep.
kind of touching technology on some level, and it's like using it as a crutch, like, really doesn't matter what business you are. If you use it as a crutch, it almost feels like it's going to be so detrimental for your guest experience, irrespective of like what level of fine dining you're in, versus like using it as a part to like empower the stuff that you already have, can take you to the next level. And I hear that time and time again, especially from hotels as well, where, applying like your check-ins, for example, like online check-ins and like self-service check-ins, and like, they're great, but if somebody doesn't do it well, that experience is what they'll remember. And I think hotels and like accommodation in particular really suffers from that, which is like, there was somebody, I was chatting with somebody recently, and they were telling me about, like, like night managers, and we were talking about that at the beginning of the call, and it's like, if somebody's flight's delayed and they come in at, say, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're grumpy and they're tired and they got kids crying, and you've got a night manager, like, their job is to make you feel like $1,000,000 and like no problems,
Yep.
but if there's even something wrong there, that I can just flip on its head, and people will remember that about your hotel. So like, the fairness of the experience almost is like, you have to be 100%. And that's
Yep.
where like the humanity comes into it, so it's great to hear that that's what you're leaning into, in terms of like the whole offer is the people that we have.
Yeah. And that's when I was working in hotels, and the mobile check-in really started to, take off. I definitely noticed that you would get your reviews or your scores back, and if somebody mobile checked in and they had an issue, they never talked to anyone. There was
Yeah,
never even if they never talked to somebody to get it solved, you never even had some of your team at least making the experience better. Even if it wasn't, they addressed the situation, they fixed it. They never talked to anyone on site to even be able to look back and be like, and Jenny was awesome. It was, I
yeah,
mobile checked in, I went to my room, it didn't get the room I wanted. I sent a chat message. Somebody texted me back, I'm so sorry, we don't have it. And then I checked out and I never saw anyone. Like, you don't even get the like. And then Jenny gave me my keys and she was lovely. I didn't have the
Yeah,
right room, but I was able to call down. She spoke to me. It wasn't fixed, so it's still a 6. You know, I'm a traveler. I travel all the time. I would have preferred my room was, but at least then it's not everything was wrong. It was a 2, and there was no positive interaction from an
totally.
employee on property.
Which,
You know?
which is kind of amazing. I mean, I guess that works for some brands, but obviously for other brands, you know, it's not why you stay in a hotel, you know, or
Right.
and it depends. But it's like I very much also like that balance of technology and humanity. I think the real winners will figure that out. You know, like the people, the companies that'll thrive, the companies that'll drive revenue will figure that part out. I guess like, you know, on that, like in terms of like on the topic of humanity, tell me like, you know, what is your sort of take on the job market itself? And now, I mean, with respect to hospitality, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's roaring right now. I mean, but with regards to hospitality, because it's interesting that you kind of mentioned it at the beginning where you were saying like, you know, finding number one problem you had was like the quality of the type of employees that you need. And then second of all, it's like getting enough bodies in and of itself to even interview. So I'm curious your take on the job market and like what goes into your opinion there.
Yeah. So a lot of this won't cover current company because we do compensate very competitively and
Yeah.
make sure that our team, you know, isn't struggling just to pay any little bill.
Yeah.
But I think hospitality in itself struggles from that. Um, it doesn't pay. It has that reputation of you're going to be a line employee making a fairly low hourly rate to deal with, unfortunately, upset people quite often. Um, I think that puts a lot of people off from the industry as a whole. And just how do we overcome that while still maintaining profitable businesses? Um, that to me is just part of the struggle. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know any other industry I would ever work in, so I never questioned it. But I could see if you're deciding between going into nursing or going into hospitality, going in, you know, there's all kinds of room for growth and to move up and get promoted. But it almost feels like if you're looking at almost a sports analogy, it's the baseball league instead of the NBA. You're gonna grind at single A, making
Yeah, a
barely
couple
any
hundred games.
money, not having a great time, and hopefully you love, you know, that
Yeah.
interaction compared to, you know, you're able to come in somewhere else, make more money, don't quite, maybe you don't love your job, but you don't have to deal with somebody who's angry. And just how do we promote more of the opportunities or the joy that comes in
Yeah.
hospitality, and kind of offset that narrative of enjoy being a front desk agent who's gonna have a painful day 3 days out of the week, and you're making $12 to $13 an hour, and that's, you know, in previous jobs that I've had, one of the first things I always looked at was what are we paying and
Yeah.
what is the actual market, because if you can you can be a great manager, and yes, people do leave because of management, um, but that's within our own industry. If they're going to leave the
Yeah.
industry, it's probably a good chunk of it is the dollars to what you have to deal with.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's funny because obviously I've got like we got over 1 million candidates on the product now. So it's like I see the data of like all the different restaurants and hotels, not like individual data, but like the aggregate level data and just the trends in that. And you know, it's interesting that like, you know, hotels are not just competing with restaurants and restaurants aren't competing with hotels anymore. You know, for the kind of hourly worker talent, it's like Amazon and DoorDash and Uber Eats have kind of blown those gates open. And it is kind of amazing. I mean, more power to the people that want to like exit hospitality and go, you know, work in an Amazon fulfillment center, have their headphones in, listen to podcasts and fill boxes and get 2x the hourly salary. I mean, more power to them. But it also like, creates an enormous challenge. I always go back to that kind of famous number of how many people left hospitality during COVID that never went back, like 800,000 or something. And it's like, where are those people going to be replaced? Like, how are we going to find the knowledge gap of the people that left? Especially, I hear a lot about, and I've heard a lot, that it's not just like the hourly kind of line worker, but also like a lot of the managerial class and the promotional, the people that were probably in line for promotions in 2020, 2021 kind of got out because closures, lockdowns, reopens, lockdowns. And people have families, and hospitality was at the front of all of this. Like, whatever way you look at it, like, you got your firefighters, you got your cops, and people kind of neglect thinking about, hospitality in this context. Like, people were open, restaurants were open, they were all wearing masks and plastic visors, and I can only imagine. And like that kind of, like, I would say, like, institutional brain drain has really yet to be like, what's the word, not retrofitted, but like kind of replaced almost. And it's such an onus on you as a leader, an HR leader here, to figure out, like, how do we train the next generation of talent, like, so that we can, figure out a promotable class of employee to, like, not just be a server today, but could potentially be like a restaurant manager tomorrow.
Yeah. So even I would say pre-COVID, I was noticing a lot of those supervisor, entry-level manager applicants, young, maybe they have a college degree, more likely they had a college degree, a complete lack of experience, never actually went and worked in a hotel, never actually went and worked in a restaurant for more than a single summer, never got to see the things that they need to be able to do and work through and understand actually being done. Like, there's one thing to sit down and be in a class and be told about something, and there's completely different to watch a manager above you handle a situation, how they work through it, and develop that on your own. I was never much one for school. It definitely has value, but I always found myself sitting there like, why am I not at my hotel?
Yeah, like a sponge.
Like, why am I not actually doing this right now? And then coming out of that, we weren't really affected. Like you said, a lot of things reopened, so we were able to keep a lot of our managers. So we didn't really lose that brain drain. But it's how do we continue to grow our employees so that they can be the next ones up. And even if it means they go somewhere else, that is what it is. But my currently working a lot with high schools and tech colleges and colleges. We're hosting a high school. They have a cooking program where their kids are in learning, and our executive chef is going to do a private cooking class with them. So something we normally charge a pretty good amount of money for couples to come in and learn. We're going to provide it for those students, and maybe one of them in 2 to 3 years joins us. So no quick investment. These are high school students, but create the impression. They're going to learn some skills, but we're in a beautiful area. If they want to be a cook and they want to create great things, we're going to create that memory so that when they're ready for that job and they've been working somewhere else, maybe they went to school somewhere else, we can stay at the top of the list of, I had a great time when I was there, and a couple years down the road they decide to rejoin us instead. And just creating that flow, where it's nice to get people who apply because they found you online. How can we make it early on in somebody who really wants to be in hospitality, had a great experience with us, that wasn't just I came and ate there. It was they provided something for me. I didn't realize it then because I was a 16-year-old in high school, but I'm 20. Let me go back and work there. They were awesome. Yeah.